Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, February 9th, 2021 regular business meeting of the East Bay Municipal Utility District Board of Directors. Due to COVID-19 and in accordance with the latest Alameda County Health Order and with the Governor's Executive Order N2920, which suspends portions of the Brown Act, this meeting will be conducted remotely. In compliance with said orders, a physical location has not been provided for this meeting. These measures will only apply during the period in which state or local public officials, health officials, have imposed or recommended social distancing. The Legislative and Human Resources Committee met this morning and will report out under item 6. Also, the board participated this morning in the Customer Assistance Program workshop to receive information on the 2020 program highlights and future actions being taken to ensure the long-term success of the Customer Assistance Program. All directors, including myself, are participating via Zoom. A roll call, Madam Secretary.
Director Coleman,
Present.
Director Katz,
Present.
Director McIntosh, Director McIntosh, you're frozen, but
Well, we can see that she's here.
okay. Director
We'll
Mellon,
consider that, yes.
Present.
Director Patterson, Director Young, President Lenny.
I am here.
Okay.
And Director Lenny is
And
here.
President Lenny, yes.
Yes. Great. So let's start in with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I have one announcement from closed session. The closed session meeting this morning, February 9th, 2021, the board considered the claim submitted by Waste Management of Alameda County dated December 28th, 2020. That claim requests that the district defend and indemnify Waste Management for the liquidated damages assessed against Waste Management on December 11th, 2020 by the City of Oakland under their mixed materials and organics collection services contract. By unanimous vote of all directors present, the board has denied that claim by Waste Management. There are no other announcements from closed sessions. On to public comment. If members of the public wish to speak on agenda items, whether on the agenda or non-agenda items, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard at next in this meeting, and comments on agenda items will be heard when that item is up for consideration. When prompted, please state your name, affiliation if applicable, and topic. The secretary will call each speaker in the order received. Each speaker is allotted 3 minutes to speak, however, have the discretion to amend this time based on the number of speakers. The secretary will track time and inform each speaker when his or her allotted time has concluded. We will now move to the consent calendar. There are 2 items for consideration. Any of these items need to be pulled from the consent calendar?
I'll move the consent. John moves.
All right. Director Coleman moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Director Katz seconded. All in favor, we need to have a roll call vote.
Correct. Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson, Director Young,
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes. All right, that passes unanimously. We are now on to determination and discussion, with our first item being the legislative update. Marlene, show yourself.
Took me a second there, but here I am. Good afternoon. We have a written legislative report for you today. There are two bills with a position recommendation. It is early in session to be bringing bills for position recommendation. The billing deadline is the end of this month, but these are repeats from last year. And these are two measures that the board adopted support positions on, and the author's offices have assured us that they intend to move them essentially as is forward through the process again this year. Director Coleman, did you want to?
Sure. Thank you, Marlene. We met this morning in Ledge HR, and for those present, we were in support of both AB 100, and I'm trying to find the other one right now. I'm flipping through my stuff here.
SB 61?
Thank you, SB 61, and then we took as informational SB 222 and 223.
Would you like me to run through AB 100 and SB 61 quickly, or
Sure.
entertain questions, the preference of the board? Okay. AB 100 is sort of a belt and suspenders to our Get the Let Out bill from several years ago. What this bill would do is put in state law the NSF lower performance standard for leaching from end-use devices. So that's faucets, basically. And the lead standard that EBMUD was able to put in, which is the no lead standard, would be in addition to this leaching standard. So it builds on that. We feel it's protective, therefore we're recommending a support. SB 61 is workforce training programs. And this measure, pending appropriation by the legislature, would provide $50 million in grants for support services for low-income individuals that are participating in workforce training programs. Support services would include things like childcare, transportation, the idea being to provide the support that people need so that they can spend their time in the workforce training program. Looking at the programs that EBMUD participates in, the Baywork and Jewish Vocational Service Program is an example of something that could have eligibility for these grants if the legislature appropriates them and if this bill were to be law. And we're recommending a support here.
In accordance with our meeting this morning, since we did support AB 100 and SB 61, I'll move the two items.
Have a second?
I'll second.
All right, seconded by Director Mellon. Any other discussion or questions about those items? All right, let's have a roll call vote then.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh. Did we lose her again? Director McIntosh, you're frozen. Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yep.
President Lenny.
Yes.
I heard you, I recorded your vote, Director McIntosh, thank you.
But she's not voting for me. I vote yes.
Thank
Well,
you.
do we really know it's Lisa in there,
Yeah.
actually? I don't know.
I recognize the voice anyway. All right, thank you. Marlene, do you want to talk a little bit about the
Yeah.
informational items?
I would. There's two bills at the state level, and I wanted to give you an update on federal funding actions that are happening. SB 222 and 223 are two pretty complicated bills. They build on measures that Senator Dodd has authored in the past, and we wanted to make you aware of these early. Our objective is to look at these bills in the context of our existing program, as well as what we are considering in terms of enhancements to our customer assistance program. to see where there's alignment, to see where there may be work that needs to be done. And we want to engage and work constructively with the author's office and the sponsors so that when it's time to recommend a position for the board, we'd like to be able to come in as positively as possible on both of these measures. The background is SB 222 builds on Senator Dodd's AB 401, which is a bill he had when he was in the Assembly. And that measure required the State Water Board to do a study on affordability and have the State Water Board come up with a recommended approach to addressing low-income assistance at the state level. The AB 401 report was completed early last year and has been resting at this point. And what Senator Dodd would like to do is get that conversation going within the legislature. As the bill is written right now, what it would do is set up a statewide program for rate assistance for water and wastewater. And the rate assistance would include assistance that accrues to people that pay the water bill directly, as well as people that are in multifamily situations where they may be paying their bill as part of the rent, but they're not a direct customer of the utility. There are some components to this. Sorry, I just lost track of here we go. Some ideas about how the State Water Board would get the data on who would be eligible. This bill proposes that the investor-owned electric utilities and the publicly owned electric utilities share their rate assistance customer data with the State Water Board. So they would know generally who the low-income people are, certainly in those programs, and be able to use that as a way to push the assistance out. The bill is silent on some big issues. One is, what would the funding source be? And the State Water Board report estimated that the annual need for this program somewhere in the ballpark of $600 to $700 million a year. And they had a suite of options for funding. So those conversations will be complicated. And I don't know the senator's timing on when he wants to start looking at that aspect of it. The other piece is it's silent on whether or not the approach would allow for the grandfathering in of existing programs. So could a statewide program coexist with a program like EBMUD, and the state would be the source of funding and would be the program that runs the assistance to those that are not direct customers of the utility? Or are they wanting to get rid of local programs and just have a single statewide approach? So that's an example of a couple things that we need to understand better as we work through these bills. The write-up is basically a summary of what's in the bill. So you'll see there's no analysis in the write-up. At this point, it's just information only. You ready to move on to 223? 223 would revise Senator Dodd's SB 998 from a few years ago. And you may recall that that is the measure that puts some requirements on what it should look like in a consistent way statewide when utilities proceed to shut off status for customer non-payment. And we spent quite a bit of time working with Senator Dodd and his staff, and I will say they were very, very good about working with us on that measure. We have some specific provisions in the MUD Act that were protections that went beyond what Senator Dodd proposed in 998, and we wanted to make sure those protections were retained. And at the end of the day, what ended up in 998 reflected a lot of what EBMUD was already doing. What SB 223 would do is go further than 998. And there are a few aspects of this that are new, several. A couple that I wanted to just mention. One is arrearages management program. And this is the idea of doing some sort of debt forgiveness on a periodic basis if payment is consistent. And I know there were some related concepts discussed earlier today. Complicated concept, but something that we need to look at. There's also some language on limitations on using liens. That's something else that we'd also like to look at. There's more to the measure. Again, we want to be constructive. We want to go in looking at this on how can we be helpful? How can we make this something that really complements our efforts and makes a good model for the state? So this write-up, like the 222 write-up, is informational. There's no analysis in it at this time.
Any questions? Comments? Certainly very appropriate bills and topics and things that we want to keep track of, given in light of, you know, our ongoing policies and our workshop this morning. Thank you, Marlene.
Sure. Would
Anything
you like
else
to-
that you want to update on?
Yeah, one more item for you. The federal COVID relief funding. I wanted to give you a quick update on what's going on there. There's a lot going on with no conclusion, is the short answer, or the short story. Right now, there are two potential sources of COVID relief funding that have been enacted at the federal level that would apply to water and wastewater utility customers. One is a rate assistance fund that's relatively small. It was $638 million nationwide. What that means at the state level is somewhere around 60 million, roughly. And you can imagine the need is higher than that. And I'm just talking about COVID-related arrearages right now. I'm not talking about long-term rate assistance programs that are more permanent. On the COVID arrearages front, the state board, just on water and wastewater charges, is estimating somewhere around 600 million is where the state is at this time. So it's short of that. So there's a lot of competition for the funding. There's a lot of discussion about how that funding should be prioritized. There have been no conclusions at this point, but we're engaging at the administration level, also on the legislative level, and at least providing EBMUD's perspective and the situation with our ratepayers that have arrearages and our desire to be of assistance to those ratepayers. The other source of funding at the federal level is the rent relief, and it builds on rent relief that was passed last spring. What's different is this version also allows for payments to apply to utility arrearages. And the way they've prioritized it at the state level is priority one is rent arrearages, and then everything else is priority two. So utility arrearages would be in that secondary priority. Also prospective rent payments. When people are on the brink of homelessness, they want to be able to provide a little relief moving forward. That also is in that second tier category. So we are also reaching out on that assistance package to see if there will be any funds available for those customers in EBMUD's service area that may qualify for that funding. Moving forward with the new administration, they are looking at an additional COVID relief package, and the number they're talking about right now for utility rate assistance for COVID associated need is $5 billion nationwide. So substantially more than that 638 million. So there may be some opportunity there as well. And we are actively engaged in those discussions at the national level, representing EBMUD's interests. Any questions?
Don't see any. Is there any sense of timing with the federal government actions that might be helpful?
Well, there are two things that the federal government needs to do. One is they need to get that 638 million allocated to the states. And we have been pushing for them to basically get moving on that, get the money out. That's action one. Action two is on the next relief package. And the conversations are happening now. Timing wise, what I heard yesterday was within the next 5 weeks is what they're looking at to get a package together.
Marlene, Frank Mellon here. Maybe not the right time, but what's happening on the recall effort?
Oh, sorry, I almost couldn't hear you. I looked at it yesterday, and as of yesterday, I don't believe they have the signatures. So it's really, they're still in that signature gathering mode. And we have seen a couple people say, hey, I would want to run if there is a recall effort. That's all I know at this point.
Thank you.
Back to the previous subject for a moment. When you say we're working with them on that, is that something, have we sent a letter saying, hey, we really could use some support and help this way to all of our local electeds as well as to the president or anything?
We have done that and then quite a bit more.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. All right. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Marlene.
Thank you.
The next item then is approve actions related to the recruitment and selection process for the general counsel position.
Good afternoon, President Linney. This is Richard Young speaking. Good afternoon, board members.
Hello.
Just as a note, I was thinking about this last couple of days after putting together my presentation and going back 10 years, I was thinking when we did that initial recruitment back in 2010, when Alex was selected for the general manager position, I was thinking, hey, this is going to be my first and last general manager recruitment. And then when Jelana retired, I was thinking, so this is going to be my first and last recruitment for general counsel. As we know, last year we have Clifford as the new general manager, and now we're going to be seeking a new general counsel. So I just think reflecting back on that.
Does that mean we can't get rid of you? You've enjoyed working here longer than you thought, or these positions are coming up sooner than you thought?
I thought they were going to outlast me. I mean,
Yeah.
I've known them for a long time. So anyway, it's been a pleasure working with you. But on to our next task. So
we're happy you're still doing this, Richard, and we're sorry to see Craig go.
Yeah,
Just
so
to be
am I.
clear.
So I'm here to talk to you about the upcoming general counsel recruitment. We have some items that we're going to need to take care of today, and I'll be working with you throughout this selection process. Today, I wanted to talk to you about a few items. Thank you, Risha. I want to talk to you about the recruitment type that we want to do. We also want to talk about finalizing the recruitment brochure, which you're all sent copies of, and to approve the schedule. And the schedule is going to kind of vary depending on what happens with the selection process, the type of selection process that we use, and what happens with the applicant pool. And then also today, we're going to need to appoint an ad hoc committee in terms of the beginning portions of the selection process. So I wanted to go over, next slide, please, Risha. Went over recruitment options. So we basically have 3 different options for this recruitment. One is to post the job internal only. We have a limited number of internal candidates or employees that would be candidates for this, potentially candidates for this recruitment. Second option is to open it and advertise more broadly towards California. As you may know, the requirements of this job requires someone to have passed the California bar. And then the third option would be to advertise much more broadly, basically nationwide, There are people that have passed the California bar that are residing outside of California at this point. There's pluses and minuses for all of these different options, and staff is currently recommending the second option, which is basically targeting California talent pool. That's where we're going to find a majority of our candidate pool, and it also broadens our potential candidates for the recruitment. I think it just gives us more options and gives us more to look at doing some outreach within the state of California. Does anybody have questions about that table or questions about the various options? Can't see if there's any questions.
Richard, the table
Yeah.
was in the packet, but it's actually not, the table you're talking about with the pros and cons? Is that the table you're
Yes.
referring to?
Yes.
That's actually not in this presentation, but the board did receive it in their packet.
Yeah, so I was
Okay.
wondering if any of the board members had any questions about the three options or preference.
So, Richard, we've got first make a decision on recruitment options and then do the next steps.
Yes,
So if I don't mean to be presumptuous, but I like the idea of option 2, which is California and within, and I would so move.
I would second that. John.
I would agree with that, Frank, and I'd be the second.
Lisa, you said something, but it was hard to understand.
I think she seconded it.
That's fine.
Okay. All right. Is this something we would need to have a motion on right now, right?
Yes.
Or do we?
Yeah,
Is there more?
I said
We
Okay,
got that. Okay. So I'll ask for a roll call.
so,
This is the motion to recruit across the state of California as opposed to just internally or nationally.
Right. That's it.
okay, and that's for 4A.
Yeah.
All right. Roll call vote. Director Coleman?
Yes.
Director Katz?
yes.
Director McIntosh? She's on there. Director Mellon?
Yes.
Director Patterson? Director Patterson, you have to unmute yourself. I see you.
Yes, my mic was off.
Thank you. Director Young?
Yes.
President Lenny?
Yes.
Okay. Now we're on 4B.
Yes,
Thank you, Director McIntosh. I recorded your vote.
yes.
Thank you. Okay,
so now that we have our option is that we'll open to California and we'll outreach out to California. We actually have over a dozen advertising outreach resources that includes diverse outreach resources that we will post with the opening. So I can prepare the board with a list or give you a list of those agencies that we're advertising with. So I can send that to you. We'll send that to you following this meeting. In terms of the next steps in the process, we also have the brochure that was also sent to you along with you for the packet. Did any of you have any edits that you wanted included in the brochure? So what I'll need to do is get those edits from you so that way we can have staff put that together for a final brochure that we'll be posting next Monday.
Actually, Richard, my edit is very simple. I didn't see reference to Myers-Milius-Brown Act for collective bargaining. I saw the Brown Act, but there's also provisions on bargaining
Okay.
law. And my perception is there is a difference between what we have to do for Brown Act and MMB for labor relations. Doesn't have to be a bargainer, but should have good knowledge of process.
Okay. So I'll make sure that we add that language. Any other edits that we needed for the brochure?
Can I have until the end of the day tomorrow? What's your time?
Well, this is something we have to approve
Oh,
as
we
a
have to
board, I
agree on it?
understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
Um,
and
hang on a second. I'm having trouble pulling it up. Shit. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go to the regular website.
Yeah, no, I know. It's just my iPad is
Oh,
going slow. I have to reopen it, I think.
I've got a couple extra squirrels to help you if that'll
Do you want
help.
to
I
take
need
a
some squirrels,
moment
yeah.
and we can go to another, we have
Yeah,
4C
why
and
don't we do
4D
that
as
and then
well.
come back? That would be great.
Okay.
yeah, that's good. Because what I can go on to is actually our next two slides. And this is more of an informational for you because our schedule will actually be very dependent on what kind of applicant pool that we get. So if we get a large applicant pool, what we have in this slide is a timeline which shows that there's a multiple step screening process. So first of all, what we'll do is we'll have, obviously the posting period where we'll receive resumes. I'll screen through those resumes, and then the strongest resumes we'll bring forward to the ad hoc committee, which will approve later on in this meeting. The ad hoc committee will screen through the resumes and select a limited number of the candidates to come forward for the first round interviews. But if we get a large pool, we're going to probably want to screen it down to probably 8 to 12 candidates in that first round interview. So then the ad hoc committee will then interview those candidates and narrow that pool hopefully down to no more than 3 to 5 candidates for a finalist interview, which will occur with the full board. So what I've done is put together a schedule that shows all of those steps. Of course, what we'll have to do is work with Risha and I will work with you on your schedules to determine your availability and of course, all of your availability to basically slot it into this schedule. So the schedule is kind of tentative and it's dependent on both your availability and the number of candidate or applicants that we get in the process. So if we go to the next slide, this is a similar schedule, except that this is if we get a smaller pool of candidates. So as you may know, within the state
Excuse
of
me,
California,
Richard,
there's
can
a
you
lot of,
define large pool versus small pool, just in terms of the number?
so what I'm thinking is that realistically, I mean, based on the last recruitment for general counsel, as well as for the general manager recruitment, I suspect that we're probably going to get less than 20 qualified applicants for this. And I would consider that kind of a small pool. If we start getting over 20, I think it's gonna take the longer schedule. Now, the other thing with this recruitment, which differs from the general manager recruitment, is that, you know, while there's a lot of attorneys in California, I think there's a limited population of them that actually have wastewater and water legal experience. And so we're dealing with a smaller pool. And I did some research in terms of the last two recruitments, and I think we're going to end up with this small pool schedule, but I'm not sure. I mean, last time we went through, I think we ended up skipping that first round interview and then going directly to the finalist interview with the full board as shown in this current in the current slide with the small pool. So I'm anticipating that we'll end up with this small pool schedule, but I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, the times are a little bit different now than they were the last two times, like 2006 and 2000 and it was 14 that we did the previous recruitments for this. So, but I still anticipate, because of the nature of the legal needs that the district has, is that we're going to end up with a fairly small pool that's going to qualify to for this recruitment. That answer your question, President Lenny?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So the long and the short of it is, if I anticipate that we'll be going with the small pool, if we do so, we should be, I anticipate that we'll be going to appoint a person probably at the begin in the June 8th board meeting. If we end up having to go with a larger, or we end up with a larger pool, I anticipate that we'll be going to the July 13th meeting to the appointment. So basically we'll work within your schedules. I'll keep you apprised as to what's going on with the selection process. And, the other thing that we'll be working with you on is developing the selection process material. So I have an outline of materials that we'll be putting together, and then we'll be working on the details in the coming month to get all of that ironed out.
All right, any questions on this part?
Any questions on the schedule?
No, I do have a comment on the brochure now, though.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, so on bullet number 4, I would appreciate that being a little bit more prominent. And more than competence. I would almost say, yeah, I'm not quite sure what to say, but I think that this person is as much a manager of a team as they are a litigator. I think it's more important than their litigation experience. And I'd even say something about working with diverse staff and some other of those qualities. I don't want to wordsmith you, but
Yeah, I can put something together. We can put something together like that and add all of those components to it, because I think that does add value to, and the petition's going to have that.
but I'd make it the number 2 bullet almost. If there's some ordering.
No, I think actually moving it up adds more prominence or more impact to it. So
About the word experience as opposed to competence, Marguerite?
Well, it's not
competence,
just experience. I mean, you
yes.
sit in a chair and get experience. I thought of the word excellence,
How about
demonstrated excellence in,
management leadership?
or outstanding managerial competence, outstanding,
Okay,
but something that promotes that quality.
yeah, I think that sounds outstanding managerial leadership. I think sounds really good. You get that down.
Does that delay our ability to approve this today? Or can we say with those changes or something?
I feel fine having Richard
Okay.
address the comments.
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, so I'll work on that and I'll put that in. I think opening with outstanding managerial leadership actually adds much more impact than demonstrated competence.
Yeah,
And
competence is a C+.
Yeah. But outstanding is pretty up there, or exception.
Demonstrated competence is a B- anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
We want to hire a goat?
Only if they can do yoga.
All right, we can maybe clump all the rest of these items, and when we're ready. Any other questions, concerns about the schedule? I think we're good with that. Let's go ahead. Next item, appoint a board ad hoc advisory selection committee. I don't know, Richard, if you want to say anything, but that's, generally speaking, we have done, had the chair of the president, vice president, and previous president. If everyone is good with that, that's what I'll suggest that we have as our ad hoc advisory selection committee. The selection, of course, is made by the entire board, but this is an advisory group.
Yeah, so this group would be doing that initial resume screening, and then if necessary, doing that first round of interviews.
We have to have a motion for the oh, come on. Ad hoc
Ad hoc.
committee.
Well, I'll just take a motion if we're good. It sounds like for 4B, 4C, 4D,
Yeah.
and do roll call vote for the rest of them.
I'll move 4BCD.
I'll second.
All right, then we have a motion and a second, moved by Director Young, seconded by Director Mellon. We'll have a roll call vote.
Yes, President Lenny, for 4D, just want to specify for the record that the ad hoc committee will consist of President Lenny, Director Coleman, and Director Young.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Roll call vote. Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes,
Director Young,
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes. All right, motion carries. We have.
Actually, did I just know, I'm sorry.
You just realized that you're on the committee, or?
No. I just realized that our committee doesn't have any of our lawyers on it.
That's probably good.
Yeah.
It's just
I was
an
gonna say,
observation. It's
and
an
your point
observation.
is?
My point is I would happily,
How dare you.
let Lisa or Andy take my space.
What?
I do think that the three committee members that we've appointed can do an excellent job. I would be glad to step in. I would offer to step in for either of them if they wanted to substitute out. But I do think that we are likely to have a pool that will provide the board good choices.
There's an old
I mean,
saying,
I'm happy to do it.
drafted, twice hooked.
All right, sounds like we don't have to make any revisions to the vote we just took. With that, let's move on to the general manager's report. Clifford?
Yeah, I have 4 items today. The first one is our water supply update. I'll say that while the storms last month were helpful, we're still quite a bit below average for the same time of the year. In the East Bay and upcountry, precipitation totals are less than they were for the same period last year, though the precipitation upcountry is similar to last year. We do have a few storms forecasted this week. None of them are large, but they will all be beneficial. So Dave Briggs, Director of Operations and Maintenance, will provide the more detailed water supply update.
Thank you. Good afternoon. And Janetta, do I have everything configured here for the podium, or how's that? Okay, there we go. Okay, thank you, Clifford. Good afternoon, President Lenny and members of the board. Yeah, we did get a good system, our first big storm of the year about 10 days ago, as Clifford was mentioning. But really the long and the short of it is we're going to need more than that to get out of this dry year that we're forecasting for the remainder of the year. So more details to come. And here on slide 3, just to get us started here, looking at our water production, again, the red line is the present water year and fiscal year, superimposed almost on top of last year, the green line. And as we've been saying, really the last few years, we've been inching up 1% or 2 with demand in water production. That continues to be the trend. So we're forecasting another 2% or so increase in our water production when this year is done. And note how volatile the springtime is with water production and demand, which is shown in the green line. And it really is reflective of how much it rains or doesn't rain as we move through the spring. So last year we had the driest February ever recorded here in the East Bay, where I think recorded as 0. It doesn't get any lower than that. And that resulted in our water demand and production really skyrocketing last spring. Then of course it rained. Of course that did coincide with the beginning of the pandemic. But throughout the spring, it bounced up and down as it responded to rainfall. But averaging out, as we forecast what will probably be a spring with rain events here and there, we are still projecting to be a few percent above last year. Okay, so now some good news. The event that we got about 10 days ago was a moderate atmospheric river, and it was pretty much focused at the Central Sierra. So we really did recover in January, and I think if you look really closely, you can see we actually ended up a tad above average for the month of January in the upper watershed. But that being said, we're still 62% of normal for the year. We got a good start to February, but that petered out. We've had very dry weather the last week, and as Clifford mentioned, we have another series of systems coming in forecasted for the next week. We may pick up an inch or two in the McKellamie watershed. That sounds good, but it's really, for this time of year, that's below average. So more on that later. But beyond that, if there's any sort of silver lining in the clouds, we don't see the reestablishment of a ridge above the western United States and California. So the storm door is open. That's the good news. The bad news is nothing significant is showing up in the outer Pacific headed our way. But it is certainly a better position to be in to know that at least the ridge isn't parked above us. Locally, we don't quite have as good a story. That's probably an understatement. We're still at 36% of average for season to date in the East Bay. That's not good. We really need some more rain here locally. Looking at the snowpack, again, this is one data point in our watershed. This is 8,000 feet up. So this one metric is the one metric that is looking good, and it's above average. The depth of our snow shot straight up after getting about 4 or 5 feet from that event 10 days ago that covered most of the Sierra, especially the central Sierra. That snow was not very dense. It was a cold storm, didn't pack a lot of moisture, so that snow, once it packs in, will not have that much water content, but still a very welcome sight up there. Snow level was down relatively low at 3,000 feet or so. So as I just mentioned, this is the one metric that's above 100%. Always like to see that. So our depth is above 100%, but the water content of that snow is far below 100%. So some statewide perspective here. The graphic on the left, you can see the northern, central, and southern Sierra, and preferentially the central Sierra is doing better than the other two, north and south, and that's because that atmospheric river did really target the central Sierra. And we'll see this shortly when the Central Valley Project, the federal project, and the State Water Project will, in about a week or so, will publish their allocations, or at least their initial allocations for their contractors. Word on the street from the CVP is that the expected allocations for municipal and industrial customers, and that would include EBMUD under its contract with the Bureau of Reclamation, is going to be anywhere between 25%, which is more of a health and safety percentage, up to about 50%. So relatively low. That's what we anticipate seeing from the Bureau of Reclamation next week. On the state side, DWR came out with an initial allocation in December of 10%. They have a major briefing with the state board next Tuesday. DWR and the Department of Fish and Wildlife will do that together next Tuesday. I'm sure there'll be a lot of media attention at that hearing, and DWR will update its allocation to state water contractors at that time. But they're expecting 20%, but I think they would be really lucky to get that. I wouldn't be surprised if it was closer to 15%. So we can expect, at least for now, some shortages around the state. The graphic on the right shows you the water content at Caples, the upper part of our watershed, the last 4 years on February 2nd. And you can see it ranges very, very wildly. In 2018, that ended up being a below normal year, even though it was so miserable on February 2nd in terms of snowpack, or at least the water content of the snowpack. We got a miraculous March, you might remember, and that got us well into the below normal range, thankfully. And since it followed a wet year, it really wasn't a problem. 2019 was above normal, very huge snowpack, plenty of rain. Last year, at this time, we were 81% of normal. That ended up being a dry year. And this year, we're exactly the same. So more indicators than not are pointing to a drier year. Of course, there is time. We have about 35% of the water year left. So some additional statewide perspective to share with you. This is storage at the state's largest storage reservoirs. We're showing ourselves there off to the far right with our total system storage, an aggregate of all of our reservoirs. But the first 7 are reservoirs throughout the state that are used for state or federal supply. Most of these are federal. The blue bar is the height of, or represents the storage in the reservoirs now. The red bar is normal for this time of year, or at least February 3rd. And the black bar at the top is the total capacity. So all these reservoirs are more or less below normal. They came in below normal. The snowpack is below normal. So we're expecting that to be reflected in the allocations that'll come out next week. Looking at our storage a little more carefully, we're about 560,000 acre feet of storage right now. That's been constant for weeks now. We're essentially matching river inflow with releases and diversions to the aqueducts to our treatment plants. And just pointing out that the 93% figure there, which is the lowest one relative to average, is our East Bay storage, because we are relying pretty heavily on local storage right now as we accommodate various construction upcountry and around here. We are well below flood control capacity, where we have 50,000 acre feet before we even get to our flood reservation storage. So to conclude the briefing, we show this chart here where we have early February, first week of February, where we are at 560,000 acre feet of storage. And from here, a range of hydrologies is still possible. I will say, so the red line is the dry hydrology. 90% of the years are going to be wetter statistically than that red line, but that is a dry hydrology trajectory for the rest of the water year. That would end us up at 460,000 acre feet of carryover storage. We could very well track the green line from here, more of a median hydrology, and end up much higher at 580. And statistically speaking, it is still possible for it to turn very wet in March and April and actually fill the system. But I will say that looking 2 weeks out, as I mentioned earlier, we are more or less tracking the red line for at least 2 more weeks. So the staff met yesterday, the first meeting of the Drought Committee for this water year. We used that meeting to get all on the same page, the staff, while we work through everything. We are prepared for the worst, but it's certainly hoping for the best. And leaning forward on various preparatory measures, including looking at possibly scheduling CVP water. Should the board decide that supplemental water is needed, we'll be ready for that scenario if it plays out. Be happy to take any questions at this time.
Dave, I don't see any questions. Thank you very much. Very informative, as always.
Okay, so next up, we have our coronavirus update. And while I have Dave up here, he can just continue going on.
Don't go away.
Yeah, going from drought to coronavirus. So good afternoon again. Okay, so where we are right now with all of our counties, we are in the purple tier. Most, I think the board is aware that most of the health metrics related to coronavirus are rapidly improving. And it was because of that forecasted improvement of these metrics is what led the governor to pull back the regional stay-at-home order and put all of the counties back in the purple tier, even though ICU rates at that time were still very, very low, including in Southern California, where it was, I think, 0 at the time. The forecasted ICU rates were expected to be in the 20s or 30s at that time. So all the metrics have actually improved. The thing to keep in mind is, even though they have greatly improved off of the holiday peak, they're still far above in some cases where they were pre-holiday. So they're not good overall, but they're certainly much, much better and improving every day compared to the holiday peak. And ICU rates statewide, depending on what region you're talking about, are forecasted to be in the 30% to almost 40% availability rate in about 4 weeks. So the models that the state are using at this point are proving to be more or less accurate. We haven't seen any significant impacts to us operationally, and we haven't changed any of our safety protocols, although there have been some changes at the county level. We have absorbed those, reviewed those, and prepared to train staff with anything that they may need to know, but nothing very significant has happened in several weeks with respect to safety protocols. So just to remind the board of the system that we're in, the state adopted this, I think last summer, late last summer. We're in the purple, most restrictive tier. Some of our metrics, most specifically the positivity rate, is actually, I think in many of our operational counties, I think just about all of them are already in the red tier, but our positive test per 100,000 people, population, is nowhere near 7. It's in the 20s or so. It is coming down, but we are going to be in the purple tier for easily for the next several weeks or so. That one metric will take a while to get below 7. Just other thing to mention is this system really is geared towards retail businesses and reopening of certain parts of the economy. It doesn't really play a direct impact on us, but it is important to understand how it affects the economy, our customer base, and to some extent, some of the school districts are beginning, and I say underscore beginning, to have dialogue with the teachers unions about using this type of rubric to reopen schools, although some of those some dialogue is really in its infancy there, but there is hope that schools could be opening with negotiations proceeding with various teacher unions. The vaccination plan that the district has been working on, of course, that is the employees are not mandated to be vaccinated at this time. We're doing everything we can to promote the plan and facilitate vaccinations. But since the state about 2 weeks ago moved to a system that is not tied necessarily to your job, it's more age-based in terms of priority, the district may not have a role to play with registering or facilitating vaccinations for employees. That will mostly be done directly between the employee and the healthcare provider or whoever's providing the vaccination. There is still a lot of confusion out there. The state put this policy out. Many counties are still trying to play catch up, adapting to this new framework the state has put forward. But as near as we can tell, after they finish with the 65 and older group, they will move to a 16 to 64 age group with underlying health conditions for the next priorities. We may not get a priority based on our wastewater or water operators, as near as we can tell right now. HR will track vaccination rates so we can have that as a general metric to know how much of our workforce has been vaccinated. I think that would be a very useful metric for the district to track. And we are continuing to take comment from unions and employees who are reviewing the plan right now. Okay, slide 5, district operations. We are in our 5th week of testing of employees. This is our last week, so we'll conclude on Thursday. This is a voluntary test program. We have received results back from 1,300 tests with 3 positives so far. That is a very, very low positivity rate, 30 to 40 times lower than the one in Alameda County. So that is very good news. And I know we've had our trials and tribulations with this testing program, but I also know that there is a great deal of peace of mind within the workforce knowing that the people that they're working shoulder to shoulder with are that much safer and do not have COVID. So there really was some positive outcomes from this. Telecommuting has been extended to through June 18th. And really a lot of our focus now is going to be, hopefully if we've gotten through this 3rd wave of COVID hitting the district and nationally, if this is the last wave, we can then begin in earnest to roll up our sleeves and begin to work on the Safe Return to Work plan, also known as the Reconstitution Plan. And again, the essence of this plan is looking at how district space gets reconfigured, how safety plans get reconfigured, how telecommuting will begin to decrease and get people back at work. That is what is part of this plan, and the data that would drive this plan are tied to vaccination rates, infection rates, what the schools are doing, and of course, as more of a floor, what is allowable at the state and local county order level. So we look forward to working on this if we are finally on a steady march out of this. And then to conclude, we have 65 positives to date, and probably find some wood to knock on here, but we have not had a positive in almost 2 weeks. We haven't gone that long of a time without a positive since early October. So we are definitely past the holiday wave. That is very good news. and it has not been a fun experience. But I think that is behind us, and hopefully that's the last wave we see. The 61 employees here that the slide is showing, that's an obsolete figure. All of these employees are back at work now, all 65. And the 19 employees quarantined, that's 16, just based on the latest data that I have. I think that concludes my update. Thank you very much.
Really good news. Thank you, David.
Okay, so next
John,
up.
did you have a
Yeah.
question?
I do have a quick question. David, great presentation. Are we looking at, I know that there's been some discussion about people who've had COVID and long-term health impacts. And are we finding any of our 65 employees who've had COVID that they are running into the long-term health impacts, and how are we going to address that from a workforce standpoint?
Well, I think that is probably a better question for Laura, but from my knowledge, I am not aware of any employee who is in that category. I do know people in that category, but I am not aware of any district employee who is in that category.
Thank you.
Laura, would you like to address that?
Still getting used to Zoom. No, we don't know any employees in that particular situation. Most employees have returned to work, and I've not heard of any on our employees yet. So if we do end up hearing of some employees, though, our normal process would take over, where we would enter into the interactive process with them, seek reasonable accommodations, if any, leave if needed, those kinds of things. So it's an ongoing conversation with people who are suffering some long-term impacts, who may not be able to come back to their normal jobs yet.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so the next item, we have Derry Moten, the Manager of Employee and Organizational Development. He's going to provide our normal monthly update on our progress with the Racial Equity and Justice Project, as well as our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Master Plan. I will add that one of the questions that has been raised in the past by the board has been about the Diversity and Inclusion Office and who that office should report to. So in this update, we want to share with you our proposed new organizational structure, which involves the creation of a new Office of Diversity, Equity, and Development. And in coming up with this structure, we looked at how other organizations, both public and private, have structured their offices, as well as getting feedback from the Winters Group. So with that introduction, I will pass it on to Derry to give the update.
Hello, board members. Thank you for your time this afternoon. We'll give you an update on the programming, as Clifford mentioned. To begin with, our agenda will cover our racial equity and justice and diversity, equity, inclusion strategic plan work that we've been working on so far. We're also going to integrate some updates on some of our efforts around inclusion and values. We're at the point where some of our work is beginning to intersect with our values efforts. So we'll provide you with some information about that. As Clifford mentioned, we'll give you some updates on the proposed structure for the new office, and then we'll discuss the schedule and the next steps. So to provide update on our 4 active strategies from the Racial Equity and Justice Project, Strategy 1, we are in the point of implementation. Our staff here has been providing some training. They initiated with our affinity group leaders and district advocates on active listening. The training has gone well. They are going to be going into their second round of training coming up in next month in the beginning of March. The goal with this is to begin to equip those affinity group leaders and our advocates to be able to connect with our staff and provide listening sessions. We will also be working with this group as we continue on to develop our biannual engagement survey, which the advocate team will be leading. In Strategy 6, implementation on dealing with employees that are dealing with racism or bias from customers. We've worked on the safety protocol, which will be integrated into some existing protocols that we have. Also, we have been working on the response team coming together, looking at their process that they will use for in the event of an incident, what that will look like, what the support for the employees will look like, and also looking at some of our legal obligations for the employee. That group will continue to meet to work through some of those elements with the objective of having this completed sometime within the next month. For strategies 7 and 8, our teams have been continuing to document their conversations with law enforcement agencies and continue to have more additional discussions. Our internal staff have been also looking at our internal protocols, and we've been, again, making methodical progress in terms of how we're looking at engaging our audiences, customers, visitors to local facilities, and also people that are coming into the facility downtown as well. So in terms of work on the strategic plan, we've been working with the subcontractor from the Winters Group, which is OG Racial Equity, who's been providing a series of trainings. We're at the point where we're at the 3rd series of trainings, which is now working on developing our actual strategic plan through the use of what is referred to as a racial equity tool from the Government Alliance for Racial Equity. That tool we will be using to look at 5 pilot projects, and those 5 projects will be the foundation for the strategic plan as we get further into completion with that. So in terms of looking at those 5 projects, we're looking at those 5 projects being focused on, number 1, how the district is looking at capital infrastructure investments, what those look like, what our engagement process is with neighborhoods that we're working with. Number 2 is actually community engagement on a whole. How are we engaging communities to ensure that we're looking at ways that we can engage some of our communities that are not as currently engaged. Number 3 is looking at our contracting and procurement processes. How can we continue to apply a racial equity lens to our own work as local stewards, and looking at that contracting process as a resource that we do provide back to the community. Next is looking at our hiring and recruitment processes to evaluate how we're doing, be able to collect some data and look at specifically whether we have any challenges that we need to adjust in the process. And then finally, looking at our promotion and retention practices. And those retention practices range not only from internal promotion, but looking at our overall retention efforts. We get into issues of employee engagement, which will kind of center back around our engagement survey and work that we'll be working on in those areas. So our inclusion and values efforts, again, as I mentioned, we're at the point where some of our efforts around existing employee engagement efforts and values efforts are beginning to overlap. So we've delivered 2 sessions of creating a culture of engagement as part of our MAST program. That course is really focused on how we continue to use inclusion as a factor in leadership practices overall. Our new managers and supervisors training curriculum, we are working with a vendor to shift some of our curriculum so that we're looking at having kind of more of a cornerstone focus on how we build inclusive leadership for our leaders. The advocates have continued to work on development of additional tools and resources in our values toolbox. That toolbox is designed as an ongoing resource, which is on our district intranet. Allows any individual to use the toolbox to identify specific activities or resources that can be used to continue to develop our values. Specifically, we want to really influence how the value of respect feeds into the issue of racial equity and inclusion. And then finally, our values advocates have been presenting at the new employee orientations, making new employees aware of our values efforts. We've also have updated our diversity and inclusion presentation in the new employee orientations. So we're continuing to revamp and continue to apply the principles that we're learning through the Winters process into actions that we're taking in the district here. And the next item is, as Clifford mentioned, in doing research, looking at other agencies, we've been involved in conversations with agencies that are part of CUA. We've been looking, talking to local agencies and our Bay Work committees. We've been continuing to have those dialogues. With those dialogues, we've also gotten feedback from the Winters Group in terms of looking at the reporting processes for diversity inclusion. And with that process, what we do is identified that there are two main factors that we need to consider looking at structure for diversity, equity, inclusion in the long term. And that is, we want to be looking not only at internal factors where our group has really been focused, but also the inclusion of the external issues in terms of external equity, what the district's position is in terms of how we are not only servicing our customers, but our overall presence in the community. So looking at both internal and external equity factors and our internal diversity and inclusion factors, we have come up with the new structure of combining 3 divisions. Those divisions would be our existing diversity and inclusion office, our contract equity office, and the employee and organizational development division. The combination of those 3 would make up the new Office of Diversity, Equity, and Development. So under that new office, we would have 3 key focus points, with the Diversity and Inclusion Office focused on internal diversity and equity. The Contract Equity Office is currently focused on external diversity, but we would also look at how we also begin to work with that group to also monitor equity issues as reflected in the pilot projects that we discussed. And then employee and organizational development is currently focused on development, but we'd also look at inclusion factors and how our development efforts and our inclusion efforts can be combined to support overall inclusion within the district. So in those cases, back to that slide. In those cases, right now, these specific activities include workforce development, our existing diversity committee. It includes affirmative action programming, EEO investigations, contract equity, minority and women business liaisons, employee development, employee engagement, employee recognition, our leadership development programs, mentoring, organizational culture, and succession planning. So those would be all the specific actions that would be engaged under this new structure.
Would summer interns be in this area too?
Yes, our summer interns would still be under this.
Okay. Sorry for interrupting.
No problem at all. Good question. So our schedule right now, again, we're continuing to activate our strategies 1, 6, 7, and 8. They're ongoing implementation. We're continuing to allow those groups to move forward with the work that they're doing. We are currently in phase 3, which is, again, working toward the implementation of the racial equity tool on the pilot projects. Specifically, the pilot projects that we're working on, the 5 that I mentioned, we'll have our core team and our SMT working on those projects, but those teams will also do outreach to other employees who are subject matter experts in those areas to continue to engage them in the work that we're doing on these projects. Those projects will go from February. We had our initial meeting with the Winters Group on these projects last month. We have a next meeting actually this week, which February 11th, in which the groups will be, again, continuing to dig further into their projects. We will continue to then integrate our strategies 3, 4, and 5 from our racial equity and justice projects into these conversations that we're having on these pilot projects. So we'll continue to do that. The goal is to have the full diversity inclusion strategic plan completed by August. In the middle of this schedule, the Winters Group will be providing us with their initial findings sometime within the next 2 weeks. Once we have those in hand, we'll be integrating those into presentation for you coming up for the March meeting. So our next steps that we're going to be focused on will be continuing implementation recommendations from strategies 1 and 6 task forces. The representatives from strategy 7 and 8 will continue to do their outreach to law enforcement agencies. And we'll continue to participate in session 2 of 4 of the Racial Equity Tool Workshop. And as I mentioned, those are the pilot projects that we're continuing to work on with OG Racial Equity. Our pilot projects teams will be hosting their initial meetings to begin the process of defining goals and conducting analysis in the subject areas. This process has begun and we are moving forward with that. The Winters Group will be providing preliminary findings on their internal assessment, as I mentioned, and we'll begin organizing organizational changes and communication to employees of the changes, and then we'll continue to update and seek direction from the board as we go forward. Director Young, I see your hand up.
Yeah, if you're done, I was just waiting till the end. I just wanted to have my hand up for the end of the presentation.
Okay.
So you can continue.
Okay. And
there we go. My question has to do with the pilot projects. First of all, I really like the organizational scheme that's proposed. I think it makes a lot of sense. On the pilot projects, I guess the question I have is whether in that first or that category of community engagement, whether does that include our outreach in the customer assistance program, or where might that fit in, given that we're going to be putting a ton of work into outreach related to the way folks were behind. And we know that those impacted are disproportionately people of color, low-income people of color. So I'm just, is that included as part of, is that an area that's covered by the pilot, or?
Yeah, that's a discussion. The first phase of the pilots are actually for the teams to do some additional research to identify where are there needs for us to further engage. So that will be part of the process, is to actually identify that. The team members that are in that group are actually a very diverse group of individuals in terms of representation from around the district. So there are people from customer service. There are some of our facility staff. It's pretty wide reaching in terms of who's involved. So we can ensure that would be part of the dialogue that they're having. I know that the other side of the coin in that case, which is kind of a carryover into a connection point between that group and the capital improvement group, is really about that additional level of outreach that we want to do to customers to make sure that we're having customers. Part of the process for the racial equity tool is for us to be able to think about actions that we're taking and consider who are the impacted parties, and how do we start to build a relationship and make sure that those parties' voices are being heard, so that we can address it from, again, looking through an equity lens, that we're actually working to support all employees equally, all of our communities equally. So that's definitely going to be a big factor as well.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other feedback on the proposed organizational structure? I don't know if Derry mentioned it, but there will be the position that will be heading the office will report to me. Director McIntosh, you have your hand raised.
Lisa, you have a bad connection today. You're
yes. Hi. First of all, dear, let me thank you again for your leadership in this role. I always ask 2 questions. Hey, can you hear me?
Yes. Did you turn off your? Yes. If your bandwidth is low, and if you turn off your video while you're speaking, that should help. If you can hear me, Director McIntosh. You're broken up. Just a little bit. You're really breaking up.
No? I'll wait.
Okay.
I don't see any other questions or comments, so maybe I'll move on.
You can't hear me.
Oh, we can hear you now, Director McIntosh.
Can you hear me now?
It's a little better, but you may need to, I don't know if you need to move around in the house or wherever you are.
Could she call in
She can.
on her phone?
Director McIntosh, do you want to call in with your comments? The phone number is in the email with the meeting information.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, let's try that.
All right, I'll wait until, go ahead, I'll do it another time.
Next time I'll write down the 2 questions that you always ask and we'll just ask them in your stead.
Yeah, just move on.
Okay.
Okay, so finally, attached is the monthly report, and I can certainly answer any questions. I do want to just add, Dave Briggs was talking about the East Bay Reservoir operation to support the Pardee tunnel work. We have in the last...
No, I'll wait.
We have seen in the last couple of days an uptick in water quality complaints from customers in Albany, Piedmont, El Cerrito, Richmond, Berkeley, and Oakland. We're tracking that. We're going to be posting information on social media. This is related to the Pardee construction work as well as the operations to support that. And I can certainly answer any questions you may have about that as well.
Are we putting it out on Nextdoor?
We will.
And can we put it out more than once?
Certainly.
I think people don't get, yeah, that would be good.
We can do that. And that is it for my report.
All right. Minutes from the January 26th, 2021 Finance Administration and Sustainability Energy Committees are included in the agenda packet. We'll now receive a report from today's Legislative and Human Resources Committee meeting.
I'll be real quick. We covered all the items today. We approved 2 of the items, and simple as that. Marlene did a great job.
Great. And of course, we had our customer assistance program workshop this morning. I won't try to review 2 hours of work there, but I think we all appreciated the great work the staff has put into making adjustments and improvements to this program to cover more of our customers and to take a holistic approach to customer service in the district on all levels. And that's very much appreciated. As far as items for future consideration, please submit those to the general manager. Are there any director comments here at the end of the program? Oh. All right, seeing none. Next regular meeting of the board will be held on Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021 at 1:15 p.m. This meeting is now adjourned.
Stay safe and be well, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.